why on earth would you want to practice watching your mind? If you don't do it, let's put it this way, if you can't watch your mind, if you can't pay attention to what's going on in there, your mind just steamrolls you your whole life, basically. And you don't want that. None of us wants that. Because that means that we're just acting from the past. Whatever our mind was taught, whatever it does. We all have different minds, different tendencies, different patterns, things that are always going on in there. So this is just a couple ideas. That's it. It's not like the way. People have been trying to teach people how to do this for like thousands of years. So it's not like any of this is new. This is some of the stuff that helped me kind of get better at, which has paid huge dividends in my life. Okay, so I can tell you, it's cool to do this. Okay, so 3 things you need. Number 1, honesty. You gotta be honest with yourself with this stuff, or else it's just your brain playing games with itself. Sometimes it's hard to even know what an honest statement is. It feels honest even though it's actually not. So you have to be honest with yourself. There's no one else who's going to be telling you that's wrong, that's not real, that's not being honest. It's just you. You have to know what's true in here. Okay, which brings me to point 2, alertness. You got to be here. You're the one who's deciding if you're being honest or not. How do you do that? I don't know. You gotta practice and get better, okay? You can feel it. You can feel that this statement, this idea that you're expressing to yourself, even not to someone else, is real or not. You can feel it. If it's true, it feels a certain way. If it feels off, feels not really right, feels a different way. Okay, so those are the 2 big ones. And 3, obviously, you need some time, aka you gotta actually do it. If you don't do it, it's not gonna happen. And that holds true always. So if you want to set a time every day, 10 minutes, doesn't need to be long. Who cares? 5 minutes. Okay? But you do have to do it. If you don't do it, then you don't do it. You never do it. And then actually nothing will happen. So even if the time is tiny, you got to do it. So that's number 3. Okay. So what do you do? Okay, some ideas. 3 ideas. Techniques, you can call them even, if you want to be fancy. Number 1, write stuff down. Writing is insanely powerful. I think everybody knows this already. But if you haven't done it, maybe you don't really feel it, the power of it. Why it's powerful for me is it makes things concrete that usually are not. They're just flying around in here. So they're confusing. They're not solid. Your mind is shifty. Your mind can do whatever it wants. It's up here in La La Land. If you write it down, it is there. You wrote these words. That's it. It's not like the words are going to shift on the page. Not going to happen. That happens all the time up here. If you write it down, that is not going to happen anymore. It is there. And I would say, don't delete it. Because if you do, you can't do number 2, which is later on, some later date, it can be a week later, whatever, read it. Now this could be mega hard, depending on the stuff that you wrote down. Oh, I forgot to mention, what do you write? Anything. The things that are in your mind. The whole point of this thing is to get to know your mind a little bit. So write the things that are in your mind. They can be emotional, they can be things that you are thinking about what has happened. It can be something emotional that has happened that you can write about, or just the thoughts that are in your head. Okay, what's being triggered? What's going off in there? What's happening up there? Just write it down. It doesn't really matter all that much. Instead, too, when you're reading it, you just read it. It's pretty easy. You got to be there, you got to be alert, and you have to be honest in your interpretation. If you're doing any interpreting, which you don't need to do, you just need to read. Okay, this is just bringing you face to face with the stuff that you wrote, which is your mind. So it's like pretty simple, but it's concrete because you wrote it down. So it's not like you're thinking about what you thought yesterday. That can get so confusing, like a jungle. Especially if you've never done this before. It's a jungle up here. So reading the writing is a concrete way to check out what was in your mind. And you might have to do this over a period of, I don't know, a month. Try it out, see what happens. If you're cringing about what you write constantly, which might happen, that's great, that's gold. Because if you're cringing at what's going on in your mind, that is a wonderful thing. Because minds are cringy a lot of the time. It's horrible what's going on up there. It's so confused. It's so wild. It's so repetitive. It's the same thing over and over. It's suffering. It's self-torturing. It's all this stuff. Loops. Over and over. Same thing. For me, that was the big discovery. It was like, oh my God, I'm saying the same stuff over and over. It's the same vibe, at least. It doesn't need to be about the same exact thing. But it's applied to everything that happens. It's the same vibe. It's the same. I'm doing the same thing. What the heck? My mind is out of control. Okay? You might discover this. Or you might have a pretty sane mind up there. And that's great. But that also means that you probably aren't doing this, right? Because the whole point is you think your mind is overactive. You think you know that there's too much stuff going on there and you can't quiet it down. That's the problem. It's overwhelming. And if you write it down, and the more you write and the more you read it, the more you see how idiotic this is half the time up here. And how unnecessary. And how loopy. Loop. So writing, reading, and number 3 is kind of like a completely different thing, which is more advanced. Sitting and doing nothing. You just sit here. And then you're really doing it. It's like the practice of watching your mind. What comes into here? I'm sitting here, I'm doing nothing, aka there's no huge stimulus. Okay? When there's a huge stimulus, you get drawn into whatever. Very quickly, very easily. What if there isn't a stimulus? Then it gets really fun. Because then you see really clearly what your mind is just coming up with. In a vacuum, essentially. The more in a vacuum you can be, the better. Because the more clearly you see what your mind is actually just producing out of nothing, out of thin air. You can think about what happened yesterday, the embarrassing moment with Johnny at school, or, oh my God, the thing that I did at the store just an hour ago. It's horrible. I should have done this. I should have done this. Okay? So many things, as everybody knows, that your mind can do. So that's kind of like the real hard version. You know, of course, you can do that for just 5 minutes. And then you could write that down. What came into my mind when I was just sitting here not doing anything for 5 minutes? Was it a pull to get on my phone or freaking do whatever? Was it being angry about, what this person did to me just now over and over? Was I just stuck in there? What was going on in there? Which brings me to the third thing we're talking about, which is 3 types of thoughts to look out for. I don't know, I just broke it down into 3. I'm sure there's many more. Number 1, associations. This just means something that you even see while you're doing nothing just takes you somewhere else. Our brains are insanely good at associating one thing with something else. That's like what they're doing the whole time. They make a million connections. So there's a tree out there. I might remember climbing a tree when I was 7 and falling off. Whatever. So you can find yourself thinking about something nonsense, something completely unrelated, and you know that your mind has done at least one, but probably multiple jumps, multiple associations to get you to some weird place that has nothing to do with what is going on. Okay? So associations. Number 2, emotionally driven loops. This is where most of the associations actually end up, I would say. At least in my case, that's what has happened. Associations go until they hit something that they like. Meaning something emotional, some emotional content. Something that reminds me of something that's going on right now, probably, for what I'm feeling right now. That resonates, that is the same. My mind is so good at doing this. And suddenly I'll be thinking about some freaking moment that has nothing to do with here, that makes me feel bad, or makes me feel slightly off, or makes me feel like embarrassed, down, like a loser. But probably I was feeling like a loser before, and that's why my brain went there. This can take many forms too. So there's like the past, you can la 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 over the past, or you can fantasize about the future, what you're gonna do, la 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 la. Billion forms that this can take. I'm summing them up as these loop states where you can get caught. Number 3 is practical thought, I would say. Now this one you don't really have to worry about because it probably won't be happening a whole lot. This is more what you do when your mind is not going nuts. You can think about what you're actually going to do. Something that is actually helpful, that you haven't thought before. So non-repetitive, practical, useful thinking. This may be where you end up once you're a little bit more gotten rid of the bunch of crap that's usually up here. I need to do my homework. You actually need to do that. Okay, you can do that after this, or whatever. Or I need to call this person I forgot again. I'll put it on my to-do list. Whatever, there's thoughts like that. But they can also take over and they can loop. And once they're looping, there's something else. You thought it already. You thought it once already. There's no need to keep thinking that you're going to do this. You got it. If you keep doing that, then fine, write it down right now. And then if you think it again, it's a loop, obviously. You already have a reminder. You don't need to think about it. In any case, those are just some tips, tricks. I hope they help you. Thank you so much for being here. See ya.